the specialization that's happening really early on in youth sports now, and kind of depends on where you're at in the country. I was in Southern California and I specialized early in softball. That was just from 10 years old. That was my one sport.
Sure.
And everything I did revolved around softball. I went to college at OU and noticed that some of my teammates, whether they were from the Midwest or the East Coast, they specialized in other sports and they whooped me in the weight room. I mean, whooped me in the weight room. So, from your perspective, just in your expertise, how important is it to train the body for sport as opposed to really specific softball training when it comes to physical? I see a lot of trainers out there that are specializing in certain things, but I fear that the entire athlete isn't being accounted for in the training.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to put one foot on each side of the line here. I think there's a ton of scientific evidence out there that tells us if young children specialize in one sport for more than 8 months out of the year, and all the components that define specialization, they're going to have a greater risk of injury. So they'll likely be more often injured than kids who don't specialize. But they'll also be lacking in other fundamental skills, right? You can imagine that someone who only plays softball may not have a great ability to kick a ball as well as someone who's played soccer or whatever the other skills are that come with other sports. And so, there's that piece of specialization. But at the same time, uh, there are kids who only want to play one sport, or and may find it completely rewarding to focus on a
I did.
sport.
Yep.
uh, and I know the medical community will largely say don't do that until you're old enough to handle those demands. But I think there's a middle ground. I think it's okay to look at one sport as long as the demands of that sport, physically and mentally, are being addressed appropriately for the child, and where they're at in their physical development. So that may mean if you only play softball, you just need to focus really well on how to recover from whatever you did during softball that day, that week, that month, that season. And that may mean taking some breaks. That may mean this, buzzword of load management,
Yep.
even at a level for a younger athlete. So I think there's a place. I think it's okay to be a specialized athlete if that's where you derive your pleasure and that's where you want to focus your energy. I would just say that there's a big asterisk after it, that your risk of
Mhm.
injury is greater. You may not have the well-rounded athletic ability of someone who plays more sports, but if that's not important to you, then and that's okay. But let's make sure that your training methods and the way you rest and recover meet the demands of being a specialized athlete.
Right. So let's just be smart. Pros and cons to both. Just be aware
Right.
of your situation. So I want to take a couple steps back. I know we talked about the warm up and how that's really just a blip, right? It's there's so many things that have to come before the warm up. The warm up just revs the engine up. What about the cool down? Because I didn't do much of that when I was younger. We played 3, 4 games in a day, and as soon as that last pitch was thrown, cleats were off, and I went into the car and sat in the car for 4 hour drive. Right?
Exactly.
Tell me about the importance of the cool down, and for our youth out there, our coaches that are listening, parents that are listening, what are some simple steps that they can take post game to ensure that they're staying healthy?
Yeah. It's paramount. There has to be sort of this period of time immediately after activity where things are gradually brought back down to a baseline level. So going from, running first to third, second to home, you're sprinting, you're out there playing, and then all of a sudden, within a few minutes, like you said, cleats are off, you're in the back seat of a car, your posture's terrible, and you're stuck in that spot for several hours. Not ideal. So there has to be a period of time where there's some focus on flexibility. Let's gain some mobility back in the joints that likely lost some of that mobility over the course of a game. I'm pretty sure what pitchers' shoulders feel like after throwing a bunch of innings or multiple games, as softball pitchers often do. Uh, we need to make sure that there's some good focus on range of motion and flexibility and joint mobility overall. So stretching after a game is super important. I think also just the mental recovery, right? You're in this hyper vigilant state. You've got tremendous focus on whatever it is you need to direct your attention to. But we need to come down from that gradually. So in addition to cooling down the body and maybe gaining some physical flexibility, I think we have to do that to our brains too. So let's
Yes.
gradually step away from the game mode. I know, I've heard lots of stories about, the car ride home. And oftentimes it's this like very stressful period where this mental focus on whatever just happened keeps going. And we really just need a period where everything's allowed to just slowly come back to a normal period, a normal state,
Yes.
whether that's our muscles, our joints, or our brain. I think all of them really have to be part of that cool down period where everything has a chance to settle back in
Yeah.
to a non-competitive state.
It's funny for the kids that might be listening. Um, if you would have told me to breathe or meditate when I was in middle school, I would have told you to get lost. I'm like, I got things to do. Headphones on, we're jamming, right? Like there would be no, I'm just thinking of all of the cortisol and the adrenaline that just gets shot through the roof when you're playing. I mean, it's like fight or flight when you're on the field and you're trying to win a championship. And then to try to just go back to normal life without assessing, I'm not in danger zone anymore. I'm not, trying to kill someone. I'm just in the car ride home with mom or dad, right? I mean, if we can start to incorporate a little bit more of that self-awareness enough to do some breathing exercises. As an adult, I have to do that to survive this life, right? I got to do that to survive this life. So if we can start to incorporate that, you're not too cool to breathe. This is a technique, and these things that Dr. Joe is talking about, these are important for the longevity of your career. Don't be too cool to stretch. Don't be too cool to get some breathing exercises going. You can never really do too much. So I think that's great advice.